words of the Lord will never pass away. Well, we've talked about the uniqueness of the Bible. The Bible is not a #1 bestseller like a lot of people think. The Bible is the #1 bestseller. It's not a #1 bestseller. It is the #1 bestseller and has outsold more books than any other book in history. And the second book that has outsold more books than any books in history is Pilgrim's Progress, a book about the Bible. Friends, the Bible is the very first book in history. You see, back then the Bible was written on papyrus and animal skins. Books were not in existence. The very first book, or codex, is that of the Bible. So we can safely say that the book is a Christian idea in origin and is that of the Bible. Now friends, the Gutenberg, he was a man who invented the printing press, because in the days of Christ there was no such thing as a printing press. The very first book off of a printing press was that of the Bible. The very first book off that printing press sells for $100,000. It is one, if not the most expensive book in the world. A codex manuscript was sold to Russia for $500,000, friends. The largest telegram in the world is that of the Bible, and the Bible is the very first book in outer space. As the astronaut read, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." The Bible is truly, truly unique. I mean, if it wasn't for the Bible, we wouldn't be celebrating Christmas. We certainly wouldn't be celebrating Easter. We certainly wouldn't know anything about AD and BC. Friends, the Bible is truly, truly unique. It's one of a kind, and no one in any smart and logical courtroom can deny the very uniqueness of the Bible. What is the Bible for us? It is God's holy word and teaches us things that will protect us. What are we asking from our children that God isn't already asking from us, friends? Now, let's take another step, another ladder of trying to attest the validity of the Bible, and that is history and archaeology. Has history confirmed the very stories found in the Bible? Let's get on it.
Why all the fuss over Sodom and Gomorrah? It's a mythological, moralistic story. The cities never existed.
Sodom and Gomorrah certainly did exist, and we have an ancient cuneiform tablet from the city of Ebla in Syria, which mentions them.
Sodom and Gomorrah were not destroyed by fire and brimstone. This was invented by the same minds that invented hell's fire for the disobedient.
Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed by a massive fiery explosion, which is certainly in agreement with the fire and brimstone account described in the Bible.
Now, before we even bring proofs to substantiate the claims of Sodom and Gomorrah as a historical event, look at these historical events. A Gilgamesh epic stone tablet which describes the flood, just as mentioned in the Bible. Now, this isn't from a Bible point of view, but from a secular point of view. Again, a Babylonian obelisk records a flood, a universal one, and also talks about longevity of life, just as recorded in the book of Genesis. Taking a closer look, we find Dionysius, who is mentioned in the book of Acts as the very first bishop of this church. A stone tablet was uncovered which mentions Dionysius as the very first bishop of this church, just as recorded from the Bible. Taking a closer look, we see a stele which records from a Canaanite point of view that there were in fact Israelites in the Promised Land around 1240 BC, shortly after the Exodus mentioned in the book of Exodus. Now, taking another look at historical events of the Bible, we find Sargon, a king of the Assyrians mentioned in the book of 1st and 2nd King, and is a historical event. Another king, Ashurbanipal, from an Assyrian point of view, shows him out on a lion hunt. This is the very Ashurbanipal mentioned in the Bible as the king of the Assyrians. Again, we find the only known archaeological discovery of Solomon's temple, and it really reads on the jar, a jar dedicated to the holy priests of the temple of Yahweh. This substantiates that there was a Solomon reign, a temple in Israel, and a holy priesthood. Watch, a clay tablet giving a history of the first 17 years of Tiglath-Pileser III, and names Ahaz, king of Judah, mentioned in 2 Kings 16.
Well, my objection to this part of the Bible is the depiction of the country as a well-watered, well-fertile area capable of sustaining large herds of cattle. In reality, it's a harsh land, and certainly not a place that two Bedouin herdmen could become rich during a generation.
It is naive to assume that the climate of Palestine has remained the same from ancient times as it is today. We know that in Palestine, in the past, there were heavy forest lands and grasslands. And so in Abraham's time, as the Bible states, this particular part of the world was capable of supporting his flocks, and the fact that he could make a grand living in this part of the world.
Why all the fuss over Sodom and Gomorrah? It's a mythological, moralistic story. The cities never existed.
The Ebla Geographical Atlas. This comes from the mid-3rd millennium BC. It's a list which contains the names of 290 ancient place names. Several of these bear upon Genesis 14 and the cities of the plain. Name number 211 is Sodom, perfectly equivalent, clear to read, and phonetically equivalent with the biblical Sodom.
Now, what are you going to believe? A map that dates back to that time, or the empty words of an author?
I want to see for myself. No!
Archaeologists have excavated at least 3 out of these 5 sites along the Dead Sea. These sites were abruptly terminated, and there is an ash layer across the surface indicating that they were destroyed by fire. One other thing of interest is that there are 5 wadis along which these sites are built. They drain from the top of the Jordan side into the Dead Sea Valley. And at the 2 northernmost of these wadis, they have found, associated with the sites of Baba Dra and Numeira, a couple of large cemeteries. In these cemeteries, they have found over 50,000 individuals buried, indicating that there was a substantial population in this region at that time.
Now, what are you going to believe? A great population in that region, a map on a stone tablet, ashes on the city itself destroyed by fire, Bedouins in that region that refer to this pillar as Lot's wife, or the empty words of today's doctors now teaching our children? Friends, take a look at history and archaeology. Historically, the Sea of Galilee, called the Sea of Galilee back then, is still with us today. The city of Jerusalem, the city of Bethlehem, other cities like Jericho, as you will see, that have been unearthed and uncovered. Other historical events, a list of slaves including Hebrews from Egypt about the time of Joseph. Remember, Joseph took his family to Egypt. Then they were enslaved, which led up to the Exodus under Moses. How about this historical event? A Babylonian chronicle describing the removal of King Jehoiakim of Judah, or Israel, and other Jewish prisoners in Babylon. Now, friends, before this event took place, God prophesied to these people that it would happen, just as it did. The Adam and Eve seal, found near Nineveh in 1932 by Dr. E.A. Spicer, who dated it about 3,500 years BC, showing a man and a woman hiding behind fig leaves with a serpent in the middle.